Hey, my name is Courtney and I design sewing patterns so you can make beautiful handmade clothing at home and build your own handmade wardrobe for you and your little one. And today I wanted to share how to get started sewing. I know with all of the resources at your fingertips, it can be a little intimidating and overwhelming to know where to start. So I wanted to just compile a little video that would lead you in the right direction. And I've made some videos in the past that will walk you through supplies and how to set up your sewing machine, what fabrics to make, and stuff like that. So if you're looking to start there, I will link below the playlist for you that will get you started in the right direction. I think the best place to start is to break down some basic skills that you'll want to have for any beginner project. A beginner project could be anything from a little bear for your little one to an item of clothing, a dress, or a blanket. It can be a range of things, and so these basic skills will carry you through these projects. The more you hone them in, you'll be more confident at the sewing machine to take on bigger and more complex projects. So when you're sewing a garment or something you're going to wear, there's an order of operations that you'll want to follow, and this will create that perfect end product that you'll love to wear, and it will be comfortable and look like that final piece that you're aiming for. Sometimes this is an unnatural order of operations because you're going to piece things together that may seem out of order, like you want to do your inner facings first or shoulder seams and then skip a few steps and then go back and add the arm. There's this order that you can go in that will create this end garment that you're desiring. So this is where a pattern really comes in handy. The pattern will lay out the order of operations just as you should follow it. And so I would always recommend to follow it in order and don't skip ahead. Then you'll really end up with a product that you're proud of. With every project, you'll be using a straight stitch. This is the most basic stitch, and you can do this on a sewing machine. And when you do a straight stitch, you're going to start with a back stitch that will lock those threads in place so they won't unravel later on. In most beginner projects, you're going to also want to do a zigzag stitch. A zigzag stitch is also a basic stitch that comes on most sewing machines, and it can take the place of a serger or an overlocker so that your edges won't unravel during wear or washing your garment. So make sure that you practice your zigzag stitch beforehand, and then after you do all of your sewing and all of your straight stitches, you can follow up with a zigzag stitch to make sure everything is locked in place. If you have seen any of my patterns, you have probably seen a gather stitch, and it is one of those stitches that can look prominent on one garment but could also be the unsung hero on something else. It's taking a large piece of fabric and fitting it smaller into the shape of the dress or the shirt or the jacket or whatever you're creating. It's adding this extra fabric that's going to create a drape or a nice ripple or a more casual pleating, you might want to call it. You might be surprised at how many projects you're going to use gather stitches for. So here's how to do a simple gather stitch. Start with the bobbin thread and the top thread pulled to create a long tail. Insert your fabric under the presser foot and lower the presser foot. Before you start, you're going to lengthen your stitch length to the longest it can go. So you're not going to backstitch here because these are just the stitches that are going to be used for the gathers and can be removed later on. Start 1/4 of an inch away from the edge of the fabric and sew all the way across to the end. When you get to the end, you want to create another long tail with the bobbin thread and the top thread, and cut the threads where there's still a tail on both ends. You can repeat this process about 5/8 from the edge, and you want to do this again so you have 2 threads to pull, and this will give you a little bit more strength to maneuver these gathers together. Holding on to the bobbin threads, these are the bottom threads, and you want to hold them in your left hand, and with your right hand you're going to gently pull the fabric and it will start to gather together. And you want to be gently pulling the fabric and pulling the bobbins at opposite directions. Don't pull the bobbin too hard or it might snap the bobbin thread and then you'd have to start over. When you have a bunch of fabric pulled together on one side, you can go to the other side of the fabric and hold the bobbin in one hand and the fabric in the other and pull it again, and have these gathers meet in the middle. If you're fitting your gathers to a garment or another piece of the pattern, you might want to follow the directions, and it might instruct you to pin these pieces together in the middle and then gather to where the gathers meet at the middle or in a certain place. This is so that the gathers will just naturally distribute and be more a uniform look. Gathering can take a little bit of troubleshooting, so take some time on this. I would recommend using a muslin fabric or something you can practice on to practice your gathers. So take your time with this. If you'd like to see another way to gather, I'm going to show you here just a little trick of using a zigzag stitch and a piece of yarn. Most everything you're going to make, you're going to create a hem. So a hem is the bottom of pants or a shirt or a dress or a sleeve. It's this finishing detail that makes a lot of difference. And a hem can go from a 1/4 of an inch to 2.5 inches wide. And the reason is for different kinds of garments. A more casual garment might have a thinner hem, and a more sophisticated and upscale garment might have a thicker hem. And whatever it is, it can just lend to the end product, and your pattern will lay out for you the measurements of everything. But the basics of a hem are to fold up the bottom edge of your fabric. You're going to press this again, and this final press of the iron will give it that clean look. And then you can either hand stitch or top stitch around the hem and finish off your garment. There are so many different ways to hem something, but it is one of those details that once you pay more attention to it, it will really set your end product apart. Sewing around a curve is pretty common in beginner projects. For example, our slipper patterns or our teddy bear, there are lots of curves, and these shouldn't intimidate you. You should just take them with the approach to go slow and to line up the side of your presser foot on your sewing machine to the side of the curve that you're following. Make sure you're not cutting corners or you're not cutting too far into the shape. You want to keep the seam allowance that your pattern calls for, and you want to just watch the edge and follow that. Once you're finished sewing the curve, you can go back and do some snips around the curve. This will allow for the shape to become more prominent when you turn your item right side out. A tip that I shared in one of my previous videos is to practice on paper. So with curves, that is a great idea to just practice on paper before going to fabric. So now that we've talked a little bit about the basics of what you'll need for any beginner project, now let's talk about the steps to actually get to that end result that you're actually looking for. So you have your pattern in hand and you need to know the next step. The first thing is to just break everything down into attainable steps, and you can do this by writing it down or just thinking a few steps ahead and working backwards. I always recommend to allot double to triple the time that you think or have been told that a project would take. That is because every step is important, and you want to break down every step and do it well before you move on to the next step. So that could be printing out your pattern and taping it together in an afternoon, or it might take 2 afternoons. And I've totally been there before, where you just have this lofty goal to make a dress by 6 p.m. and it's like 3 p.m. in the afternoon. So don't overwhelm yourself. You'll end up being frustrated. You won't pick up the sewing machine in a couple weeks because you're so frustrated at your failed attempt. So break it down into attainable steps, and that is how you'll get to that end result that you're looking for. So first, break down the step of putting your pattern together or ordering it and waiting for it to come in the mail. While that's going on, look for the perfect fabric. I have a video that would help you find that perfect fabric for clothing, and I will link that below for you. Make sure you've done your research and you found a fabric that you're excited about, that will live in your closet for a long time and get a lot of wear. It's better to wait for that perfect fabric than to make something that you hate the shade of green that it ended up being. And then once you get your fabric, you have to wash it and finish the edges. And this is a huge step that will change the end product of your garment. So be thoughtful and intentional about your fabric choices. And like I said, every detail matters. So then you have your fabric prepared and you want to cut out your pattern. This could take another afternoon. So see how I'm just taking every step and I'm not trying to overwhelm. I just want to take it step at a time. And especially if you're a mom like me, this can't all be done in nap time. It's gonna take a series of nap times, and I think that's the point, because that time away will make your end product better, because you're gonna come back with fresh eyes and maybe some fresh inspiration moving forward. So after you've cut out your pattern and everything, it might be time to actually watch the tutorial video or associate yourself with the pattern by reading through every step. I like to always read through the steps beforehand, because it's like following a recipe. You might miss something if you don't read ahead. So read ahead and then start back at the beginning. After you've associated yourself with the pattern, it's time to actually start sewing. And so this is another thing where it's like, let's not try to just sew everything in an afternoon if this is our first go at something. And then just follow the pattern as it is laid out. Watch some videos. If you're not understanding something, ask questions, look up different ways to do a certain skill. I think that's the beauty of sewing. There's usually a different way to do that same technique, like I showed you earlier with the gather stitch. And so if you're having trouble with something, maybe look up another way to do that certain stitch or that certain technique, and maybe you'll learn something new. With sewing, it takes time. It takes a lot of time. And I think that's the beauty of it, but it can also be something that deters people. And it might also be the reason that it is shoved aside or put in the back of a closet, is because just the culture we live in is not built around the slow process of sewing. It's not built around the taking the time and breaking things into steps like I mentioned earlier. But I would like to argue that it is worth it, especially if you have this desire to learn how to sew. That's a great desire, but it does take intentionality, it takes practice, and it is attainable, and it is something that you can do. It's great to be a beginner, and I just want to take that pressure off you to be amazing from the beginning, because I don't think we're ever amazing at anything from the beginning. So I would just love to encourage you to keep practicing, keep showing up, create a space that you love to come into that's inviting and warm, whether that is a corner in your bedroom or whether that is an open space in your home. Whatever it is, just find that place that would be a secret place for you to come away to slow down, to find that rest for your mind and for your soul, to think about the day and to get lost in the process. I have loved sewing and how it has flowed into other areas of my life, how I've become a better cook because of it, because I have become more patient in some areas, and I just think it is a beautiful practice and a lifelong journey. So I hope you take up sewing this year. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, I would love to answer them. And I'm still learning, and I would love to hear what you're learning as well. So I hope you have a wonderful day. I'll see you next time.